Racial profiling, it still exists indeed in our society. Last week, Seahawks safety Cam Chancellor was shopping for a gym to rent for the offseason. He and 4 of his friends were taking a look at a gym in the state of Washington that was closed. They saw a couple of women inside, tried to get their attention so they could check out the gym, but the 2 women's responses was instead to call 911 instead of letting the guys in. And here's the 911 call.
911, what are you reporting?
They're trying to get in, and we've told them multiple times they need to leave. There's 5 of them, and just kind of like pound on our doors and break in, and I'm not really sure it's going to be.
Is that a business or a residence?
It's a closed down business. It's the gym, Redmond Athletic Club.
Any descriptions?
I mean, there's 5 of them. There's like 3 African American, 2 white. I couldn't see any weapons, but they got cameras and pictures, and I'm really not sure what they're trying to do here.
Can I get further description on the black subjects?
There's like 2 males, a female, all African American, and there's like 2 white, I think a female and a male.
Still in the parking lot?
Yeah, they were trying to get us to open the door, ask for information. I don't know if they're like homeless kids. I know that there used to be a lot of heroin addicts around here. Do
they look like teenagers?
I would say they're probably early 20s, maybe mid-20s. They were trying to take a bunch of pictures, and I don't even know what they're doing right now.
You decide to share this story. What do you want people to take away from you?
By me sharing this story, you know, I hope the world and I hope people understand that judging people by the color of their skin and judging people by what they have on can really hurt people's feelings. No matter how strong they are, no matter what they do, you know, it can hurt people's feelings, and you just have to think about that. You have to care for one another and, you know, treat each other accordingly, because I believe it's character over color. Character over color is big to me, man. You know, it's not about what the color of the skin, it's not about what somebody has on, it's about how they treat you. And, you know, how they treat you accordingly to whatever the situation is.
So that was Cam Chancellor speaking with our very own Carrie Champion. So, guys, your reaction to all of this, Freddie?
Not surprised. Seriously.
Not surprised at all?
I've seen it and heard about it constantly, where people have an idea of what somebody looks like, male, female, black, white, whatever. And it's not what Cam Chancellor brought to that situation. It's what the people and their ideologies brought to that situation. The 2 things that jumped out to me was, we think they're trying to break in, or they're trying to break in, they're taking pictures. I'm not a robbery person, but if I'm trying to break into something, I'm not going to have blow-by-blow coverage on my phone taking pictures. So that kind of turned me sideways, number 1. And then number 2, can you describe the 3 black guys? And that's what jumped out to me. Now, whoever the dispatcher is, they're trying to get to the bottom of the situation, trying to make sure that, okay, who do we need to send there if this is a situation that is jumping off? And it doesn't have everything to do that they should have known who Cam Chancellor was. Not everybody watches the NFL, especially in Redmond, Washington, where the Seattle Seahawks played. You can't assume that everybody should know who Cam Chancellor is. So I don't want that to be put out there. Well, they should have known. Not everybody watches the NFL. But the reason I said I'm not surprised is that I hear about this constantly, about racial profiling. And it goes the other way, too. I mean, I've been on the basketball court. White guy would show up in our neighborhood. We would say either this guy is really good or this guy is terrible. And more often than not, we took the terrible line because we didn't think he could play. Was that stupid on our part? Absolutely was stupid on our part, because we wouldn't want people to look at us that way, the way that we looked at white players in that situation when I was young, not as I'm old. I'm a big believer that, yeah, it would be great in a perfect world that everybody's going to look at everybody and look beyond their religion, look beyond their color, look beyond their gender. But I live on planet Earth, and I know how people are going to look at somebody with a visceral reaction immediately. And if you're 2 women in a place of business and you see Cam Chancellor's not a small dude, he's not. But there was also a female there and 2 white people there, and the first thing she saw was the black people, or the black guy, the big black guy, and she, or whoever it was, already brought that to the table. So was I surprised? No, because we're going to hear about this with somebody else, either with an athlete or somebody else who's African American, or who's somebody who's not white, and then there's going to have to be explanations and people saying they're sorry, but it's not going to stop. That's maybe that makes me jaded, or makes me cynical, guilty as charged. But until I start to see a slowdown in that, stuff like this will always give me I'm not surprised because I've seen it before, and I guarantee I'll see it and hear it again.
I don't think you're cynical. I think it's just a realistic view, actually. But
I mean, it doesn't seem like it's slowing down. I guess the optimistic hope would be like when things happen like this to a black athlete like James Blake, when we saw that happen, and now Cam Chancellor. It perhaps gives people a different framework about who these people are that it's happening to and what this looks like actually when you relate it to somebody, when you relate it for somebody to an athlete who they know, an athlete they probably celebrate. I think the reason why my takeaway from this was, okay, Cam Chancellor, now we have an opportunity, someone that a lot of people in Seattle and across the country already connect with if they're football fans. Now maybe they'll listen to this story more than if it was just a random event happening across the country that we know happens all of the time. But now, because it's Cam Chancellor, well, maybe we have a different discussion about it. I think it was interesting to see him talking, a guy that we usually associate with huge hits and this warrior mentality that we see across the NFL. You see him talking, and like, he's affected by this in the same way that anyone would be affected by this from like a human nature standpoint. And as common sense as that is, to hear people say that out loud is nice, because too often we go into NFL Sundays or we go into sporting events and we think these guys are superhuman. And yeah, of course, if you're like, oh wait, they're not superhuman. Yes, they have partners. Yes, they have kids. Yes, they have. But to see him sitting there with Carrie and look really hurt by this was eye-opening in a new way. And every time I see an athlete do that, I appreciate it. I appreciate that they're willing to literally take off the helmet and be somebody that we know they are 98% of the time.
Yes, so many different places to go with this. First of all, whenever we get these kind of stories, you and I have a radio show together on Sundays. We talk about this. I want as much context as I possibly can get, because the impulse and the instinct, and it's not always wrong, is to pass judgment on every character in the story immediately. And these are big, important questions, character-defining questions for every person in this story. And I want to know everything that I can. I don't know everything at this point. We haven't heard from the lady who called 911. We haven't heard from the 911 dispatcher. All these people are important to hear from. However, that being said, this, and I appreciate your perspective, Freddie, this is at that messy place in human interaction where people judge each other with exactly the point I'm making, insufficient information. How can I judge someone else's character? I can't. It's one of the hardest things to do in life. So you use shortcuts. What are the shortcuts people use? They use color of skin. They use dress and appearance. They use gender. They use many things to make quick decisions. And the problem with that is it's often, and was in this case, inaccurate. It wasn't fair to Cam Chancellor. It wasn't fair to a whole host of people that would be in that same situation. I'm not going to skirt the issue of race. I don't want to make this too abstract or too philosophical, because while I appreciate you recognizing that it does happen in many ways, humans look for shortcuts. It does happen more often when it comes to race. And that is what apparently happened, I think, without hearing from the person who called 911, what happened with Cam Chancellor. I try to see this from her side as well. Why did she make all these judgments? Why did she dial 911? She clearly read the situation wrong. Was she adopting a better safe than sorry mentality? Her boss said that's the right thing to do. Was she doing that? Was she making unfair racial stereotypes and racial jumps to conclusion? Sort of looks like that's what the case is. In the end, I think you can only come away with this a couple places. It's very human. At the end of the story, it's very human. And that's what Cam Chancellor does a very good job of relaying to us. It hurts when you are judged based upon something shallow and inaccurate and negatively different than who you are. And we all, regardless of what color our skin, our gender, our political beliefs, anything, can and should appreciate. To be judged that way is extremely hurtful. And Cam Chancellor, you know, I'm sorry to him that he went through this. I don't know, to your point, how many things we can do to fix that messy area of interpersonal interaction. I would say this, because you said I don't know how much better it's getting. This is my last point. Congressman John Lewis is one of the great civil rights heroes of this country, and he has said, for anyone that doesn't think it's getting better or that hasn't changed, I would ask them to walk in my shoes. The man has seen decades of racial relationships in this country, and what he's saying is it's not perfect, and we'll probably never reach it, but it is getting better.
I think we should point out, right, these were two women alone in a space.
Right.
So there is that, for the reason maybe that spurs the 911 call. Because you are alone and there are humans trying to get into a space. And whether you're a man or a woman, perhaps that plays into it. Now, then what goes forth from the call between the 911 officer and...
Or even before the 911 call, read the situation better,
right.
Ask them more clearly what they want.
Exactly. Well, we don't know what communication levels between them, but Freddie hit on something when he pointed out that whoever made the call was bringing with them, I don't think you said racial baggage, but essentially that's what it was, and even
Many
on our radio show. Meaning that even when we look at any sports story, like how we talk about Johnny Manziel, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not looking at it through race. Well, I probably am, no matter what. And so you get to this place where you're like, how is it going to get better? In a lot of ways, it's like each person at least assessing what racial issues am I bringing to this space right now? If you're making, as those things happen, being like, do I have racial baggage? Is that why I'm processing this in this way? And you make quick hit decisions as well, but if we're for me anyway, I start to process more like, why am I reacting that way? Why do I feel that way about Peyton Manning? Why do I feel that way about Johnny Manziel?
Right. And the women felt that it was a threat. Believe me, it's a place of business. And I've stated this. When this story broke last week, I said, well, you have to be safe. I clearly understand that when you have two females alone, and I've gone on record and said that I wanted to make that point before we got started with this and making that point now. Like I said, the part that really, really turned me sideways was the fact that she said they have cameras and taking pictures and they're trying to rob the place. And I'm thinking, I've never heard of that before. When someone's trying to rob the place and smile, selfie, I'm taking your money, that's number one. And number two, can you describe the three black guys?
Right.
So those are the two things that turned me sideways, was that they decided with that assumption to go that route in their mind. The safety issue, yeah, you can't take any chances. Things happen in beautiful neighborhoods. We hear about home invasions happening in affluent neighborhoods all the time. Danger seems to be lurking around the corner everywhere. So yeah, if the women felt that they were threatened at the place of business, that their safety could have been tantamount, I understand that. But then to go, okay, we've heard that a lot of heroin addicts around here, and she basically said a lot of heroin addicts around here, and that they're all black.
Right.
That's what she went with that with me. That's what turned me sideways. That one, and also the dispatcher saying, well, describe the three black guys. How about, can you describe the subjects?
Yeah. Right.
She said there were 5 people, 3 black, 2 white.
Yeah.
Describe the subjects.
I agree with you. Had I not heard the 911 call, I would have assumed, well, you know what, 2 females, and we don't know, I don't know what type of area that is. Anytime I'm by myself, or even with a girlfriend, walking down, a dark street, like, I don't want any dudes around me, it could be sketchy. But then the 911 call, then that's when everything changed, and the dynamics of that kind of told us about more about the situation.
And believe me, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. There are times I've gone down neighborhoods in New York where I've seen 2 brothers that don't look exactly right, and I'm going to be on alert. It's not just a white and black thing when it comes to that situation. Black people have done that too. Not excusing it, just stating a fact. But at the same time, is it going to change? I would hope so, but I don't think that's happening in my lifetime because there are too many variables that go in there.
If there's a lesson in the end, it is for the people that called 911 to say, you got this wrong. You clearly got it wrong.
They may not feel that they're wrong.
You got it wrong. Now, how can you get it right next time?
And by getting it right, this is how it happens, just having discussions and educating people about it. All right.